Greetings everyone, Mike here with Sci-Fi and More, and welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, welcome to our Team Sci-Fi family, where nostalgic positivity reigns supreme. Well, if you are a fan of Star Trek, we have something special for you today. Sean Ferrick of the wildly popular Star Trek YouTube channel trekculture was kind enough to join us today and sit down and talk all things Star Trek on our Galactic Chat segment.
Oh, since you were talking to Sean today, can you ask him if he has ever been to the Abbey Road studios in London? I would very much like to go there.
Well, I will see if I can fit that question in.
You're not going to ask, you'll forget. Typical human overlord.
So sit back, grab some Klingon blood wine, and let's talk some Star Trek with Trek Culture's own Sean Ferrick. Greetings everyone, Mike here with Sci-Fi and More, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to our Galactic Chat segment. Now, if you're a Star Trek fan, we have a Star Trek insider here from Trek Culture, Sean Ferrick. Sean, welcome to Galactic Chat. How you doing today, bud?
I am really good, Mike. Thank you very much. Can I just say, you have like the best presenting voice. It's so good. I could listen to you for hours.
Oh, well, you should. I'm just saying, you should,
Yeah.
and don't forget to share my videos around,
Thank
Thank you.
This is the game. This is how it works. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I never really thought you listened to yourself talk, right? And I'm like, oh my God, man, I sound like a train wreck walking around. But
Most
to
certainly
hear
do not.
someone else say it, I'm like, maybe I better take that a little serious. So, but Sean, I got to tell you, I started watching Trek Culture, and kind of like is the case in my little sphere of the universe. I started watching Trek Culture quite by accident. I came across it one good day on YouTube, and I'll never forget. It was before you guys had hit 100,000 subscribers.
Ah, you're an OG. You're an
I
OG,
am.
Mike.
I'd like to think of it as legacy, but we'll go OG. But I remember you guys put out a video when you got your plaque and how carefully you were just unpacking that 100,000 subscriber plaque, and I thought, man, this is good. And the more I watched, I'm like, man, these guys, they're very insightful. They're very research driven. They put together a very, you could say slick product, but that's really not the best word. It's very professional. It's very well thought through. It is very well executed. And if I remember correctly, and this is going back a couple of years now, because I genuinely feel guilty if I miss one of your uploads. And so then I got to go back,
Well, you should. No, sorry. So thank you very
Oh no,
much.
hey, we're all about honesty here. So, that's a fair point. But but you had mentioned something a couple of years ago in a video where compared to, let's say, StarTrek.com, where people would get their news and information on upcoming Star Trek and events around Star Trek, that you guys were actually drawing in a larger audience than StarTrek.com. Now, I'm paraphrasing. This is from a couple of years ago, but how did that come to be?
It's interesting, and it's something that it's both at times very true and at times it's not the case at all, because like Star Trek Main would still have far more and should have far more subscribers, say, than we do, and rightfully so, because that's the main channel. What they do is, or what well, I should say, what we do is that we probably have more content. So we try and aim for a video a day, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes we can go a little bit longer than that. But in doing that, what that gives us space to get into the real nitty-gritty of everything. Like, we have lists, obviously we just did our big one there, ranking all the uniforms. We have lists about ship classes. We have uniforms about different types of phasers, where, because we have the room and the breadth to do that. Whereas, something like StarTrek.com, obviously being the official one, that's where you're going to get your breaking news is going to come out there. You know what I mean? Because they
Sure.
are going to be the ones who are going to break the stories, and we'll jump on it as quick as we humanly can. But I think that's how you can have more people, might say, on a day-to-day, might check us. It sounds really weird saying this out loud, but it might happen that way, just because we have a little bit more of the niche stuff that we can
Sure.
get into. Because as you say as well, we try and aim for everything. Like, we have content from the cage right up to section 31. We have got everything covered. Not to say that we've done everything, because no, we haven't. It's not possible to have covered all 60 years, every single thing.
No.
Thankfully, otherwise none of us would have jobs.
Right. It's interesting you say that. You touch on something kind of critical, and it's a good lead into the question I had for you. 60 years worth. Now, I'm in my mid-50s, okay? So
You're looking well.
I remember. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's all the, clean living you do, the pizza, the Easter candy, all that stuff. It's clean living. Clean living.
Exactly. Sure, listen, aren't the Italians looking well?
Well, you kind of got me there too. I mean, that's kind of what I am. So I'm Italian descended. We age gracefully. Let's just put it like that. And as time has gone on, I've put on more weight, and we all know fat don't crack. So we're good.
Believe me when I say I'm working on it, my friend. I'm working on it. Yeah.
You'll get there. You got about 10, 15 good years to go. But what's funny to me is you got a 60-year franchise. I started watching this franchise years ago. I mean, when Star Trek, the original series, first got its syndication run, that was my introduction. And I was young enough to just absolutely adore Star Trek, the animated series, because it was first run. And back in the day, for me, there was kind of a different looking big three of sci-fi, right? I had Space 1999, Planet of the Apes, the $6 Million Man was running strong. And then Star Trek just kind of came into my life and took over everything. Now, because you are so much younger than me, I find it always fascinating. I don't know why. I find it fascinating that someone as young as you has so much more knowledge than your general fan that's of my age group. And, it's not to say I'm not a fan, but I also don't follow it every day and get into the nuances. And, that's your job. So how did you come across Star Trek, step into the Star Trek universe, and step into this wonderful Star Trek YouTube channel?
First of all, thank you very much. It was very much a snowball, and it's also something that's been going for my whole life. So my dad is a Trekkie, so he got me into Star Trek when I was about that tall. So I just recently we did the ups and downs there for Generations, and I spoke about how that was my first Star Trek in the theater. Although it was general release 1994, but Ireland got it in 1995. So I was 7 when I went to see that in the cinema. But of course, I had watched The Next Generation. I had watched the DS9. Very patchy memory, obviously, but I remember watching Emissary. I had seen Undiscovered Country. I'd probably seen most of the films. Yeah, but in my babyest days, it was Dad would put on the original series, put on The Next Generation. And I definitely watched the animated series then. But of course, this is all, you caught it when you could, because this is long before there was such a thing as streaming. This
Sure.
is, there was the VHS tapes. Remember them? They
Oh,
were
of course I
available
do.
in the video shop. So yeah, we got all them. And then, so when I was, knee high to a grasshopper, I was already watching Star Trek. And at that time, as you remember, you had Next Gen had just finished, but DS9 had just started, Voyager then started. So there was sort of always Star Trek on, and there was right up until, was it 2005, Enterprise
Right.
comes to a close. Now, I've told this story before, that I was a cool teenager when Enterprise was airing. So, I was watching, cool stuff like Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined one, not realizing how much I was traumatizing myself by watching the reimagined Battlestar, but that's another story. And then things like watching Star Trek 09 with my dad in the cinema. So there was always that Trekkie interest there. Along the way, when I started to get access to things like the internet, and I could start to finally kind of, without having to trawl through libraries of books to find out behind the scenes stuff, I started to see stuff online about, the one I remember most was, I think it was Yahoo Movies, and seeing the trailer for Star Trek Nemesis was the first one I saw online. So obviously the trailers
wow.
come out to early 2002. Yeah, because that's what it was, because it's around the time that Lord of the Ring, The Two Towers. I remember when we were gearing up for that one, because back in the day, I remember I don't know where we were sourcing this trailer from. Trailer took something like 3 hours to download the trailer for The Two Towers, right?
Right.
Because, children, there used to be a time when there wasn't such a thing as YouTube. And so, you get your whatever websites you could find, because it wasn't pre-Google, but it was pre-Google the way that we know it now. And eventually stumbling on things like, what became Wikipedia, what became IMDb, and then what became Memory Alpha. All this sort of I've always just been, I love to know the behind the scenes stuff. I've always, in everything I've ever watched. Actually, it was Battlestar Galactica that really got me into the behind the scenes stuff, because it was composer Bear McCreary's blog that I was following religiously as new episodes of Battlestar were coming out. And that was one of the things that really got me fascinated in the behind the scenes. So jumping forward then to the year the Earth closed, what happened was I had been, I'd been because Star Trek had already landed on streaming at that point. So I was doing my rewatches. I had finally copped onto myself and caught up with Enterprise, and realized, oh, actually, turns out when you give something a go, it's really quite good after a while. Star Trek Discovery. And reading all about it, reading about the fall, because then what got me interested was reading about the sort of why Enterprise came to an end. And I realized that there was more information out there than just here's how a phaser works, which I'm fascinated by, but I realized not everybody is fascinated by. But everyone loves drama, and everyone wants to know why a show was cancelled, or who got on with who and who didn't get on with who. And so, I'm there reading. So February of 2020, I'm watching What Culture, because like yourself, I just liked the channel. I liked the top 10 lists. Didn't know that, because it fed into wanting to know behind the scenes of movies. And then at the end of, I can't remember what video it was I was watching, but at the end of it, there was this ad looking for writers about Star Trek, because this was when Star Trek Picard's first season was, I think, either just about to air or it was just started airing, and they were putting together Trek Culture. So I did the thing where I sent them the email, and I did that. It sounds like a joke. I literally said, take down the ad, I'm here. I need somewhere to put this information. I have all this, why do I know these things about Patrick Stewart's hairpiece he had flown in, so he could do the audition for Picard and everything. And they said, well, prove it, write us a list. And so I said, right, here's 7. Which would you like? I really wanted this job, I'm not going to lie to you. And it just turned out that, although, again, it being February 2020, I won't say the writing was on the wall for what would become lockdown and COVID, but it was, things were moving quickly. And so my day job at the time, Ireland went into lockdown on 16th of March 2020, and I got the call. We moved online for about a week and a half, and then I got the call to say that, yeah, listen, we have to lay you off. And I went, there's not really much argument I can do against this. There is, there was no work to be done. But at the same time, I was writing Star Trek articles. So in my head, just going, oh, great, I have a hobby. I have something to keep me into it. And just call it a perfect storm. Picard aired. We had Lower Decks coming out. Discovery at that stage had aired its first 2 seasons. So it was a bountiful time to write about new Star Trek. And of course, at the time, there was some articles on whatculture.com about Star Trek because they had trialed it. They had tested, is there an audience for Star Trek here? And of course, it turns out that yes, there was. And it just, thankfully, in those early days, things came together very, very quickly. We were lucky, I will say as well, that we were lucky that we were part of the What Culture family, because I will say we probably inherited our first 10,000 subscribers from What Culture. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So
yeah, well, what culture? You look at clearly Trek culture is, that is the big one of the what culture grouping in
but
terms
you're very
of.
kind to say, fun fact. So because these two fandoms don't always move in alignment, the big one is wrestling.
Oh, really?
What culture wrestling is their big one. I say there. I should be saying we're, but because I feel like I'm so on Trek, it's but so wrestling, because wrestling is enormous and enormously popular, and in fact, fun fact, that's where the ups and downs came from. It
Is it
originated on the
really?
wrestling channel, yes,
I
and
did not
then
know that.
yes, and then so. Yes, Simon Miller was doing the ups and downs on the wrestling channel, and it was adapted. A couple of the channels had trialed it, and it was adapted then for Trek Culture, and also it's obviously now on Who Culture as well. This morning, as of recording, I recorded ups and downs for The Last of Us season 2, because it's fun for us. It's so much fun to do. I love doing the ups and downs. It's easily one of my favorite things that I get to do. But yeah, so wrestling, we've got horror, we've got Trek, because Trek's my passion. Like, thank goodness. Who Culture as well. Yeah, there's quite. We do have What Culture Star Wars, which we also have. Gosh, we've a few. That's how many there are. Sometimes you're like, how many do we have?
Well, yeah, like the wrestling one caught me off guard. I was like, wait a minute. Primarily, I watch Trek culture, but I also watch the Star Wars culture because my big three that I mentioned from childhood evolved. So my big three now are Star Trek, Star Wars, and Battlestar Galactica. So, now when you talk Star Trek, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, you just need to have like a Galactica culture. That would be great, because to your point, right? You were talking about Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined Ronald D. Moore version. And I know you're a big fan of Deep Space Nine. Dare I say that's probably your favorite iteration of Star Trek?
Yep.
I would say, I'm going to go out on a limb here, Sean. I'm going to say part of the reason why goes back to what you just said about Battlestar Galactica. Ronald D. Moore was the showrunner. Ronald D. Moore was also the Klingon guy on Deep Space Nine, who orchestrated the whole Klingons joining the Dominion War and all that. So maybe there was a little, kind of subliminal push into Deep Space Nine for you. Who knows?
Like I think it's because like when I was conscious that I was watching The Next Generation, because again I was 5. It was like there's only so much I remember. So a lot of The Next Gen I sort of remember on second watch, and episodes like Redemption, Sins of the Father, Relics, which I love, things like this.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Ron D. Moore. Do you know what I mean? Yep. Actually, not entirely sure about Redemption, but certainly Sins of the Father, The Bonding as well. These are just fantastic. I love his writing style, and that then transferring over to Battlestar Galactica. Now, Battlestar Galactica is about as dark as it gets.
Oh yeah.
Which for me felt like a sort of a natural progression. Even as hopeful as DS9 was and is, it definitely was the darkest Trek at the time. We've had obviously darker since then. But I thought that was very much a template for what they went on to do with Battlestar. You have the story that came from the original. You have Glenn A. Larson's, it's there. The story of Battlestar Galactica is there. But what they did with it, back when super cool teenagers like me were sort of moving away from the sort of hopeful first couple of seasons of Enterprise, and looking for maybe something that suited our angst a bit more, And Battlestar is what sort of hooked me. Now, I then realized if I just stuck around with Enterprise, season 3 was just waiting for me. But, Battlestar hooked me at the time.
Well, let's go back to DS9 for just a moment. So I know by watching your videos that you often speak very fondly of Deep Space Nine. If you were to point at one specific episode of DS9 that is your breakout favorite, what would that be and why?
The Visitor, and for Tony Todd's performance.
Ah, Tony Todd.
There,
Absolutely.
it's funny just because that has always been my favorite episode. It's my favorite episode of Star Trek overall. And it's funny as well because there's no big battles in it. Sure, the Defiant's in it. Sure, the station's in it, but it's not about it's less about the sci-fi element than it is just about familial love. And yes, of course, there's temporal shenanigans because there has to be. But oh my good lord, because that story is a fantasy story.
Oh, sure it is.
I remember showing that episode to someone who had never seen Star Trek before because I was like, right, am I going to get you into Star Trek? Well, I'll do it lightly. And they were like, they were like, if there's more episodes like that. And of course, then you go like, oh no, crap. Now I need to find more episodes like The Visitor, which I'm sure there's loads, but then but yeah, sorry, long story long, The Visitor easily. And that scene, Tony Todd and Avery Brooks at the end. I mean, Tony Todd overall, I genuinely, I was upset when we lost Tony last year.
Yeah, my favorite character that Tony Todd played was Kern. I loved his portrayal of Worf's brother. I thought that was he as much as I enjoyed Michael Dorn being Worf, and I think he's a standout character. I thought Tony Todd embodied kind of the Klingon ethos just a bit more than Worf did. And naturally he would, because he was raised with Klingons, according to the story. Worf wasn't. So it makes sense, but his portrayal and his delivery was spot on. Well, let me ask you this, Sean. Speaking of DS9 and we know that that's kind of where your head is at with Star Trek. But when you look at the newer iterations of Star Trek, the Discoveries, the Strange New Worlds, how would you say they compare to the older ones, or what should they be doing to stand out more if you feel they're not standing out enough?
This is a really interesting question. It's also really timely because just today I finished a rewatch of the first season of Discovery. And so I think a lot of people, possibly quite rightly, look to Strange New Worlds as sort of nailing the format. It's episodic, it's that lighter style. I feel you get a lot more of the ensemble.
Sure.
Which I think is something Star Trek tends to, when it succeeds, it does it really well. With the original series, it was the big three and the others.
Right.
Even though we loved them because we got so much over the course of time, we got so much time with Uhura, Sulu, Chekhov, and Scotty, but it was Kirk, Spock, and McCoy in the original series. Then along comes the Next Generation, and over the course of 7 seasons, everyone, like, you really know those characters. DS9 is the ridiculous one. I mean, you didn't just know the characters, you knew their aunt's proctologist. Like, you knew everyone by the time you got to the end of DS9. Like, I loved, guest starring in What You Leave Behind is so funny because it runs for like the first 5 minutes of the episode of just guest starring Mark Olimo, Casey Biggs, Jeffrey Combs. It's and then Voyager, I personally, I can hear Ellie throwing a brick at me. Voyager, I think, slipped a little bit. I think Voyager it didn't really know if it was going to do big three and the rest, and then it avoided doing that, and then some characters did get a little bit of the short straw there. Okay, so I realize you asked me about the new ones. So going to the new ones, I think character is always where Star Trek does best, and then the stories. But you care about the stories because you care about the characters.
Sure. Absolutely.
and that's I think that's just the mark of the fiction I like to consume. I think Strange New Worlds is very, very good at it. We're only 20 episodes into Strange New Worlds, which is bonkers when you think about it. When you think there was 170 DS9 episodes, you know,
Oh, sure.
170 plus. Discovery. I think every season was a soft reboot, and sometimes that was positive, and sometimes it was a bit of a okay. We kind of need to get to know everything again. And in a way, it's a bit like Doctor Who when you have a regeneration. You know, you have to do your episode of getting to know everyone again. Picard was 3 different shows.
Oh, yeah, completely. Yeah.
No, that's not me saying it was 3 bad shows, but it was 3 different shows, which I think were a little too separate, because Picard season 3 has next to nothing to do with Picard seasons 1 and 2. And Picard season 2, for everything that it did get right, was massively affected by lockdown. Like, you can feel lockdown on it. And I think it really struggled with characters. I think one of the reasons Picard season 3 is as successful as it is because you care about the characters. Now you have your new characters like Shaw. You have Sidney
Awesome
LaForge.
character.
Yeah. No. But, you know, I really, really like him. And I thought Vadik, for the screen time she got, I thought Amanda Plummer was very, very good as Vadik.
She had a very powerful presence. Yeah, for the short time she had, you know, in that 3rd season, her presence was really felt. I mean, it gave each episode she was in, it gave it just a tremendous gravitas.
I really agree. I think Jack Crusher, Ed Spaliers had a tall order. You know, like you are dealing with the legacy of not only being Picard's son, but also Beverly's son. You know, so you're going to immediately be compared to Will Wheaton's Wesley Crusher. You know,
sure.
because that's who you grew up against. So things like that, like, and then you knew going in it was the last season. You knew going in that it was season 3. It was season 3. It was the 3rd season of a show that we didn't see the first 2 seasons of.
Right.
There are 2 seasons of Star Trek Picard, but season 3 is not the 3rd season of that show.
Yeah, you can watch that one all on its own and really not miss a beat, you know.
I think so. Which is a shame, because I tell you what, that first episode of Picard is a banger.
It was good. I mean, it grabs your attention. There's no doubt about that. That first episode really reaches out and grab you. And if you're an old school Star Trek fan, you know, that loved The Next Generation, it, to me, in my opinion, it really speaks to you. You know, you're like, oh, I'm committed to this show now.
I totally agree. I think, and that's so right. So what Picard could have done better was have a more coherent through line. Which I can now say, because we can say it in hindsight, it's a finished show. Discovery, I think, a little bit of the same, a little bit more of a coherence. And I think it was hamstrung from the beginning by being a prequel. And I will say this, in all fairness, I've just done a rewatch of it. It does a much better job than I think contemporary and even some older or more recent reviews have given it credit for. But it's stuck in, it's 10 years before Kirk and Spock. Okay, I know Spock is in it, but like, you've got Sarek, so you have the inevitable comparisons to, well, that's not what Matt Jeffrey's Enterprise looked like, and, you know, is that right? It is. I think it does a better job of adhering to established canon, not visually. Visually, it just said, yeah, we're not doing that, which they've been open about. They've said, like, look, we couldn't do the 60s aesthetic in 2017. We couldn't do it. And that annoyed a lot of people. And I understand their annoyance. I don't necessarily feel it, but I do understand it.
I get it too. From my point of view, Sean, I think, you know, if you give me new Star Trek, I don't care what iteration it is, I'm going to watch it. I'm going to give it a shot. I think when it comes to Discovery, just to chime in on a couple of things you said, unlike Picard and Strange New Worlds, right? Discovery launched after really kind of a long cooling out period for television. Anyway, we're not talking about the J.J. Abrams movies, but on television, Star Trek had a cooling out period, and here comes Discovery. I actually, I really had a hard time getting into it at first. I loved Enterprise, and that's kind of a hit or miss kind of show with people, but I loved Enterprise. I thought Enterprise was very clever in the way that it got back to canon, like how the Klingons went from looking like the movie Klingons to human looking Klingons. On that same note, I think Discovery was very clever too. I mean, yes, to your point, they had to come in being a prequel 10 years before Kirk and Spock, but they delivered a product in a way where they set themselves up for their own canon, and they didn't really break the canon. Now, that's just my opinion. I'm sure everybody's entitled to their own, and people will disagree with me on that. But I couldn't get through it the first time around, but the second time around, when I went back and I rewatched it, and you pick other things up, and I thought this is actually really good. All four, five seasons. All 5 seasons were really good, and they were different. But once they broke away from that Red Angel story arc, and they got catapulted into the 32nd century, I think that's really where they found their legs, if you will, because now they can write their own canon. As a result, now we got Starfleet Academy coming.
Yep. And as much as Strange New Worlds is, some other people have made the joke, it's the longest ever pilot to series order in the history of television, but Strange New Worlds is a spin-off of Discovery. Without Discovery, we wouldn't have Pike, Spock,
not at all.
and Una flying around on the Enterprise. And I have seen the argument being made that no, we would have had it anyway. I disagree with that. I do believe that Discovery was the torchbearer, and it lit the way.
Very good.
Without Discovery, we would not have had Picard. And I do think that if Discovery had been cancelled after its first season, which, obviously, every season of every Star Trek, and you have people calling for its cancellation. So that's just part of Star Trek history, But if it had been, we wouldn't have had Lower Decks. That would not have happened. And Lower Decks is the gift to Trekkies. Do you know what I mean?
Lower Decks. I tell you what, that thing, you just put a big red bow on that one for me, because I enjoy that show to death. Oh my God. My nephew and he actually kind of doesn't get it. He's like, what's so funny about this? I'm like, well, there's this Easter egg and this Easter egg, and it goes back to this. And oh my God, they're talking about this from back in the original series. And, he's too young to, have been around for any of it. I mean, any up through Enterprise. He's too young. So, and that's okay. I appreciate it, but, I think one of the other shows that, I don't know, seems polarizing to me, but I enjoy it, is Prodigy. And what I will say about Prodigy is this. At first when I watched it, I'm like, kind of getting a Star Wars Darth Grievous kind of feel going on. But season 2, that flipped the script for me. I'm like, again, my personal opinion, I thought season 2 of Prodigy was some of the best Star Trek storytelling that had come out in years. I was like, and they brought everything into it. I don't want to give anything away, but I mean, there was so many nods to the original series in there, and character development that happened in the original series, and they put it in such a glorious story. I thought I'm like, nah, this is not a kid show. There's something to this show.
That you're so right. Like Prodigy, it's, I suppose we must say, Prodigy officially not cancelled. It's sitting on a desk waiting for renewal at Netflix. That is the most current, up-to-date status of it. Because oftentimes we'll talk about Prodigy in the past tense. I do it too. And so I remember watching the first couple of episodes and being like, okay, it looks gorgeous, but okay, let's see where they go with this. And it took me a few episodes I struggled a little bit with some of the characters, and then it took about I think it was episode 5, and I went, oh, I get it now. That was that. I physically remember that moment. I get this show now. And from that moment on, and I've since rewatched as well, I went, yep, right. I get absolutely what they're doing here. Because, you know, we've been lucky enough that we've got to speak to the people who wrote it. And they said they knew coming out the gate, they knew they had 40 episodes. So they were able to write stuff into the pilot that pays off at the end of the second season.
Very
And
nice.
that is, so it rewards you for watching along. And also, as you say as well, it rewards people who've been Trekkies their whole lives, people who might have seen an episode of Picard. There's something for everyone in it. Its greatest barrier is that it got marketed as a kids show.
I agree. Because it's not. Once you start watching it, you realize it's not a kid's show.
No.
so
It's
I just
probably, yeah.
Oh no, go ahead, Sean.
Oh, just it's as adult as Lower Decks is, but it's a little bit more accessible. Like Lower Decks is for Trekkies, right? It's funny, you can watch it and have a laugh if you've never seen an episode of Star Trek, but you and I both know this was written by Trekkies for Trekkies. And that's part of the beauty of Lower Decks, right? Prodigy is written by Trekkies for a younger audience because it's accessible. You know, you can watch it as, I would say, you know, kind of 10 and under might be a bit young, because there, you know, there are bits that are like, oh, that was darker than I was expecting.
Right.
But it's well in how it handles exposition as well. It gives you enough that maybe I might get something because I live in Trek the whole time. But also, I think that if you were new to it as well, it's like, I'm intrigued. I want to know more. And because it was, I think, I feel really bad saying this because I've nothing against Nickelodeon as a company. Nickelodeon's logo did it no favors.
Well,
I
it's
feel bad for it.
it's a logo that has association attached to it.
Yes.
It's meant, when you see that logo, immediately kids come top of mind, right? It's children's entertainment. That's what it's. So I agree with you on that one. I agree. But yeah, no, it's a fun show. If people haven't checked it out, check out Prodigy. It's
brilliant.
more than
It
what
is
you
absolutely
think.
brilliant.
So one last question for you, Sean. I'll let you get on with your day. So since you're at Trek Culture, you know, doing God's work and, you know, preaching the gospel of Gene Roddenberry and Star Trek, which we all appreciate, all us Star Trek fans out there greatly appreciate. Where do you see yourself going from here? Because from where I sit, it kind of looks like you've got the most ideal job in the world. So where would you go next in the Star Trek universe if you could?
I just like to grow what we're doing. You know, one thing, because of the support that we've received online from subscribers. I mean, every single video, I know every YouTuber in the world says, please make sure you subscribe. What I literally mean by that is that every single subscriber makes a difference, because watch time, if you are watching and enjoying the content, that gives us more license to do more things. So we're very, very lucky. We're over 320,000 subscribers, which is incredible.
321 as of this morning. That's what I checked.
And I thank you very, very much. But what that means is that we can do, okay, so I'm going to talk boring YouTube stuff for you, right? So what that means is that we can risk things and do videos that may not immediately scream, that's 100,000 views on that video, right? Because you will see that that's many, many, many channels, and I understand why they do it, will do the same topic repackaged differently. And I promise I'm not slagging off people for doing it. I'm saying it's because there's a lot of channels, they'll have overheads that they need to hit, and so they need to guarantee they're going to do a video that will hit 100,000 or 100,000 views, 200,000 views, 500,000 views. And that then limits the scope of what people can do, right? When you have a subscriber base that watches the videos, which is thankfully what we do have, it means then that we can do videos that probably will have less views on them, but we don't have to worry that, you know, they're going to get buried and we won't be able to take risks again. And I'm more or less directly speaking about the interviews that we get to do.
Sure.
So some of the people that have so kindly said yes to doing interviews on the channel, like it's mind blowing. I was chatting with Nicholas Meyer the other week.
I
Like,
saw that. Yeah.
what? You know? And Nicholas, we know straight away who Nicholas Meyer is. You know, the truth is, in 2025, Nicholas Meyer has not made a movie in a couple of years. You know, he may not be immediately like, you know, jumping to the top of people's heads, but Trekkies know who he is. And we then, when people watch the videos and subscribe, we get to do things like that because everyone's heard the great almighty word algorithm.
Oh yeah.
When a video doesn't do as many views, it does affect the overall channel. That is the truth. It does happen, right? So we run risks when we do lists that may not do, or may not be guaranteed, sorry, because some of these do great views. Do you know what I mean? But like, you may not be guaranteed to do the 100, the 200, the 300,000 views. You run a risk that sometimes your channel might get buried. And if your channel gets buried, no one new sees it, and it becomes a bit of a bad snowball. So this is my really long way of saying, what do I want to do? Is I want to continue to grow. And to do that, that requires feedback and engagement. So you'll see, like, we literally we want to know what you want to see. We want to speak to you. And not because I always find it really funny. It's not because we've run out of ideas. We've loads of ideas, but we want to know that it's something that people actually would like to see. That's the other thing.
Sure.
You know? So that certainly is what my focus is. You know, keep continuing to cover, and I want to cover things like Prodigy. I want to cover, okay, I'm glad you're sitting down for this one. I want to cover things like Section 31 not because it's the greatest film ever made, but because it's Star Trek. You know,
yeah, absolutely.
We cover everything from the cage. Absolutely everything from the cage, you know? And there's the thing. I want to continue to do balanced reviews. I mean, I hope this comes across. We start from a place of positivity, but we are fair. And because I think we're fair, I think that's how very, very kind, very busy people have agreed to speak with us. We've spoken with people who made Section 31. They came on and they had very frank discussions about it. They didn't have to.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that.
And that is something I enjoy, because if we go all the way back to the beginning, I am that nerd that sits there reading the trivia section. That's what I want to know, these things. So if I can help contribute to helping people know that is kind of a dream come true for me.
You know, it's interesting you talk Section 31. You know, I'll briefly, you know, touch on that because I liked it. You know, I might be in a, you know, a little bit, you know, smaller of a crowd. I don't necessarily think it, you know, it felt like Star Trek, but again, it's Section 31. Section 31 on its face doesn't feel like Star Trek. It's its own entity, it's its own thing. I get that. The only, I guess, issue I would have had, and I'm not going to say it was an issue. You had made this comment before, and I really agreed with it. It was meant to be a series, and it felt like a series in the movie. That was probably, if I had to, you know, hang my hat on what I guess my biggest issue would be, it would be that. I mean, it was nice to see the chapters kind of breaking it up. But with that said, one positive thing that I think Section 31 does or did, right? And this goes back to, in my opinion, Star Trek from the beginning. Star Trek's not afraid to take risks. Section 31 was a risk. Okay, so they're not afraid to try something new. You know, I mean, you're familiar with baseball. right? I would assume.
Mhm.
So if you're up to if you're up and you're getting ready with a bat to hit a ball coming across the plate, not everything's a home run. Sometimes it's a swing and a miss. Well, guess what? If you miss, well, there's another ball coming your way. Take another swing. So Section 31 might not have been everything everyone would have expected, but from a positivity standpoint, I tell you what, I appreciated seeing that they took a chance. They tried something different, and they went for engagement with a different kind of viewer. Basically, I think that was kind of like a recruiting movie. Like, oh my God, we got to start getting more fans. But I was good with it. I was like, yeah, okay, it's not bad as a movie. Maybe don't call it Star Trek. And I bet you if it was called something else, people would have been like, man, this is awesome.
Probably. Probably, yeah.
But that's the one thing I wanted to point out, because I know there's a lot of stuff you hear it everywhere about Section 31. Like, this is bad, that's not so good. Find the good in it. Find the good in it. And to me, the good is they took a chance. They're not afraid to say, all right, we're going to try this. Oh, it didn't work. Okay, we're going to try something else. I love that. The musical in Strange New Worlds, right?
For
The
sure.
musical, that was another risk. Did everybody need to see a musical? Some people loved it, some people didn't. That's fine. That's, to me, another positive thing in that they took a chance. So,
Mm.
and I admire that. I think that's good. Whether it was a success or not, it tells me that their intent is to stick around and be around and keep delivering stories, which I'm all about. So, well, Sean, I want to thank you so very much for your time. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. Like I said, 321,000 today, and I started watching you before you hit 100,000. So, I'll spread the word about you. And with that said, where can everybody find you at, Sean?
Thank you so much. We're obviously at Trek Culture. So Trek Culture on YouTube, you'll find us. We're at Trek Culture on most of the socials. We're at Trek Culture YT on Instagram, YT for YouTube on Instagram, and then I am at Sean Ferrick on most of the socials as well. I tend to use BlueSky the most at the moment, but yeah. So do reach out. I love chatting. This is the whole thing. I love talking to other Trekkies.
Absolutely. And everyone, I will go ahead and post Trek Culture. I'll post What Culture. I'll post every culture they have over at What Culture, along with all of Sean's contact information. So if you do want to reach out to him or just want to check out the channel, please do. It's a fun channel and it is very in depth, very well put together. I think you will all enjoy it. And there you have it, Cosmic Core. We hope you have enjoyed our Galactic Chat session with Sean Ferrick from Trek Culture. And as always, guys, thank you all so very much for your continued support of our channel. You are truly the greatest sci-fi team on YouTube, and we appreciate you all so very much. Sean, do you have any last words for anybody?
Make sure to keep going boldly, lead with positivity, and look after yourselves, treat yourselves and everyone else with kindness. I think that is increasingly important day by day. Be kind and be open to kindness as well.
I couldn't have said it any better. On my channel, where I say where nostalgic positivity reigns supreme, we're going to sub yours in for this one. It sounds better. All right, everyone. Thank you all so very much. Have a wonderful day.